2022. I'm Sarah Stroman. I'm the Commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and I have the pleasure of chairing this subcommittee. I do just want to share with folks that unfortunately I need to depart this meeting early. I need to be over in the Senate Bonding Committee to talk about DNR asset preservation. And so I am going to be handing over the virtual gavel to Commissioner Kessler after Executive Director Pratt's update. So just wanted to share that all with you. Faith, I believe you are going to take the roll, if you can, for us, please, so we know who we have from the subcommittee here today.
Absolutely. We'll start with Member Grace Arnold.
Thanks, Faith.
Member Kristen Eide Tollefson.
Present.
Member Nancy Daubenberger.
Present.
Member Alan Forsberg.
Present.
Member Katrina Kessler.
Present.
Member Chair Sarah Stroman.
Present.
And Member Ben Yawaki.
Present.
We have two members excused, Member Jan Malcolm and Member Brian Murdoch.
Great. And then Faith, do you have the list of other board members who are present? The thing I always like, and I want to say, first of all, thank you to the ERAS subcommittee members who are here. I think it is wonderful that we always have a number of EQB members who are interested enough in the work that we're doing here to attend. So I want to acknowledge them and just ask you, Faith, if you have a quick list.
I do. Let's see, we have Board Member Mehmet Konar Steenberg, Board Member Gerald Van Amberg, Board Member Julie Gehring, Council Member Susan Vento, Board Member Paul Nelson, and we have a proxy for Board Member Steve Grove. We have Deputy Commissioner Kevin McKinnon here. We also have a proxy for ERAS member Jan Malcolm Dan Huff, who I believe is a Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Health. And I haven't seen him on the list, but I think Board Member Nick Martin might also be coming.
Yep, I'm here as well, Faith.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I knew I saw Board Member Martin earlier pop on the screen. So thank you all for being here. Next on our agenda this afternoon is approval of the consent agenda. And so on that consent agenda, we have the meeting minutes from January 19th, ERAS meeting, and the agenda for today's meeting. Could I please, from one of our ERAS members, get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Katrina. I will make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Kessler. Is there a second to the motion to approve the consent agenda?
Al Forsberg, I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, if folks could take a moment and unmute yourselves, and all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, we have no opposition. The motion carries and the consent agenda is adopted. Thank you. Before I turn it over to Executive Director Pratt for her announcements, I do want to acknowledge that two of our public board members will be closing out their service with not only the subcommittee, but the EQB here. So Ben Yawaki has accepted a job as the Assistant Tribal Climate Resilience Liaison for the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians. And Ben, we understand you will be relocating out of state this spring. So this is Ben's last meeting with the board. And Ben, I want to thank you for all of the time and the passion that you have shared with the EQB in this work, and wish you all the best in that new role. It sounds like a great role. And then Kristen Eide Tollefson is also, or she is terming off her board appointment. Kristen has been a public board member since 2014. And, you know, you quickly learn Kristen is an integral part of many board initiatives during her tenure here. And she will be greatly missed on the board as well. So I will just say thank you to both Kristen and Ben for their service to EQB, for their service to this subcommittee. You've both brought really valuable perspectives, and both brought really important passion for the mission and the work of the EQB. And I think we've been a better board and done better work as a result of that. We do have a custom with outgoing board members to ask them to share a few reflections with us. And so I have just a couple questions for Ben and Kristen. If you could just share with us one highlight from your time as a public board member, and then one hope that you have for the future of the EQB as you leave us. We would all, I think, benefit from hearing your perspectives on one highlight and one maybe hope or piece of advice you have for the future. So Ben, why don't we start with you? If you want to share with us on those two questions, we'd appreciate it.
Had to clear my throat real quick. I was gonna say Kristen could start, but yeah, I guess with respect to one highlight, I guess, you know, as we're coming out of maybe not isolation, but quarantining, looking forward to the opportunity to engage in some more meetings, like the first meeting I had when we went to Red Wing. And that was an amazing first meeting to be really engaged with our citizens across Minnesota on such a vital issue, to be able to have those conversations that need to be had. And so I look forward to, I know I won't be able to partake anymore, but excited about what that means for having in-person meetings again. And one thing, I guess, as I think about EQB moving forward in the future, one of the considerations that I think about is I'm not a tribal citizen from any of the tribal nations in Minnesota, but having grown up in Minnesota my entire life, the environment is something that I've always been passionate about, living both next to the Red River as well as the Mississippi River. And so as I think about what the potential opportunities for the future is, I think you know, more tribal citizen inclusion on the EQB, and what that means for advancement of tribal sovereignty, particularly as it relates to our environmental review process. So I look forward to seeing how that evolves in the future. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Kristen, why don't we turn to you next? If you can share one highlight and one hope for the future.
Okay, thank you very much. So a highlight of my 8 years as a citizen member was watching EQB regrow its mission and staff from one person, thank you, Bob Patton, in 2011 to what it is today, with a committed board, outstanding staff, and expanded representation of the public member base. Also, the strategic plan that reflects EQB's robust commitment to our unique public role and its partnership with the people of Minnesota. Because EQB's interagency and environmental review program are key access points for citizens to participate directly in the protection, preservation, and enhancement of our resource commons, as I have done for over 25 years since I was first appointed to an EQB Citizens Advisory Task Force on nuclear waste. The experience changed the course of my life and commitments and education, as it has for many who have entered into advocacy through the doors of EQB. I also particularly, like Ben, I particularly enjoyed the outstate meetings we had and the reinstatement of Minnesota's environmental congresses. I have one other highlight, which was making the motion that established ERIS. That's a real highlight. It was my only motion in 8 years, so very pleased with that. And one hope that I have for the future of EQB is that you will identify key best of meeting formats like the Southeast Minnesota nitrates meeting that Ben mentioned, and reports and tools like the silica sand tools for local governments and the current water plan with its attempt to coordinate and integrate implementation, and utilize these as potential models or templates for EQB agency work across administrations. I would really, that is a hope of mine. I promised Katie I would send a list with links. I hope she'll send, share that with at least some of you. I have one last combined hope and highlight to share. It's really been a particular privilege to serve with Ben. He's served with such dignity and direct distinction, and my hope is that there's a precedent set that will continue to notify Minnesota's tribal governments and solicit candidates for open positions in their districts. Because I have come to believe, really through my experience at EQB, that there's nothing more important for sustainability than to integrate the cultural perspectives, environmental expertise, and knowledge of Minnesota's Native people who've been here, lived here for over 9,000 years. Thank you, Ben, and thank you, EQB and Commissioner Stroman. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for those thoughts, Kristen. And I think, one of the things that I appreciate about you is you always recognize the talents that others around you bring. And so I am not surprised that that was part of your both highlights and reflections for the future. And Kristen, of course, since we are in the ERIS subcommittee, thank you. I think that motion clearly was your best motion, and we're doing a lot of good work here. But I think to both Kristen and Ben, what I really value and what you have brought to the EQB, and you've both reflected it in your highlights and your hopes, is that commitment to the public and the commitment that you showed as a public member, and the commitment to making sure that EQB as a whole remembers that we are here to serve the public and to engage the public. I think, does carry through in our work. I think it's clearly been a topic of conversation, and you two have been some of the strongest advocates of that. So my hope is that that legacy that you have advocated for and left with it continues on. So thank you very much both for your service. I will now turn the meeting over to Executive Director Katie Pratt for her Executive Director's report. Director Pratt.
Thank you, Commissioner Stroman. And I have to tag in a little bit too with some words of thanks for Kristen and Ben. And, I think I speak for all of the EQB staff team in how much we really work closely with our board members, and especially our public board members, and the amount of coaching and challenge and encouragement that they give us behind the scenes is really what drives us, what makes our job both fun and unique here at EQB. Both Kristen and Ben, I just personally have given me a lot of good advice and words of wisdom and food for thought along the way. And we would be a much different place if it wasn't for our board members speaking out and encouraging us and pushing us in different directions. So you both will have big shoes to fill, but the doors are always wide open at EQB, whether it's to grab coffee and catch up, or attend a board meeting and give a public comment, or help connect us with some new members of the public who might be interested in EQB's work. You both are great connectors. So the doors are always open. You always have a home at EQB, and thank you so much for your service. With that, I do have a couple announcements, and one is about our new public members. I just wanted to share with everyone that I'm in conversation with the governor's office, and they're continuing to work through the appointments process. We are expecting some public member appointments soon, possibly even by the end of the month. They're just getting the paperwork and whatnot in order. So I will keep you posted as soon as I learn more about those announcements. I also want to note, because we're in an ERIS meeting, that with the turnover in our public members, we will need to adjust ERIS membership as well. So board members, please let me know if you don't currently sit on ERIS and are interested in serving on the subcommittee. Please shoot me an email and let me know. Conversely, if you've been serving on ARIS and you are ready to term off and do something different, let me know that as well. And we will bring forward adjustments to the membership in the coming months. The other very exciting announcement is I am pleased to share that in May, for our May board meeting, which is on May 18th, we get to be back in person. We have all been waiting for this time for many, many months. And, as both Ben and Kristen have indicated, we've had to change our format, and those relationships that we have when we're in the room together have been held back somewhat by this virtual format. So we're all very excited. The meeting will take place in the lower level boardroom of MPCA's St. Paul office. That was the location that we typically met before this pandemic started. We will provide more logistical details in our May packet. There is free parking in front of the building. There's some new systems with parking in this post-pandemic era, so those will be communicated in our board packet. And we want the members of the public to know, and board members and staff as well, that going forward, all of our meetings will have a virtual option. So we will have a hybrid format going forward. Members of the public can still participate fully and give public comment no matter where they are in the state. We are working diligently to get our technology to align with that, and hopefully we'll pull that off without too many glitches going forward. So that's very exciting news, and I look forward to seeing you all in May. Okay, so turning on now to today's agenda, we have 3 agenda items today. First, we'll be hearing a very short update on the subcommittee for pilot program implementation. Want to keep ARIS abreast of how that is going. Next, we'll be hearing from staff a presentation on the 2021 Environmental Review Performance Report, and this is something we bring forward annually to give ARIS members some sense of some of the data that we track about our environmental review program. After that, staff will be presenting sort of a new idea to the board, which is to establish an environmental review continuous improvement process. And we'll be kind of laying out the rationale, why we think this is important, and begin to have a discussion with the board on how we might structure this. This is not a decision item today. This is just a foundational discussion to get early insights and input from the board. And after those agenda items, we will have time for public comment. So just a few logistics, board members, after each of these agenda items, we'll open the floor and open it up for discussion. You can use the raised hand feature or just jump in with questions. And Alan, I see your raised hand, so you're demonstrating how to use that. I'll get you in one second. I do want to emphasize that with these staff presentations today, we're really bringing them forward because we'd love to get your insights and discussion. So we hope to make this very discussion-based today. I know that's always harder in the virtual format, but I encourage you board members to, after the presentations are over, to turn on your cameras and be engaged and ask questions and have a discussion. Members of the public, so like I said, there'll be opportunity for public comment today during agenda item 7. And if you plan to comment, you can read the procedures and guidelines that are in the packet. And then you can use the raised hand feature in WebEx. And if that's not working for you, and the raised hand feature, now we have it located, there's a bottom toolbar that you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to raise your hand. Or if you're joining via phone, you will likely see at the bottom of your screen 3 dots. And if you click on those dots, it'll give you the raise hand feature. If for some reason the raise hand isn't working for you, please just use the chat to contact EQB staff, and we'll get you in the queue for public comment. And if you have any technical difficulties, we do have contact information in the board packet, so you can reach us during the meeting. And with that, Board Member Forsberg, do you have a question?
No, the raised hand was an error, and I think I've got it crossed out now. But, if I could add, I enjoyed working with Kristen and Ben over these last few months. I wish we'd had in-person meetings so I could have had a more of a personal relationship, I guess. But they both bring special skills and interests and perspectives to it. And as a fellow joint public member, thank you very much, and best wishes to you.
Thank you, Board Member Forsberg, and thank you for the demonstration of the raised hand. The timing was perfect there. So, so that's great. And that's all I have for updates. And with that, I'll turn it back to Chair Stroman. And I think this is when we might do the swap out.
It is that time indeed, Director Pratt. So I'm going to once again say thank you to my colleague, Commissioner Kessler, for stepping in here. And I'm going to hand over the meeting to you at this point and make my way over to the Senate Bonding Committee. Thank you.
You're welcome, Chair Stroman, and good luck with the Senate. So next, I get to introduce the next agenda item, and that is an update from the subcommittee for the pilot program implementation. And I believe that Nick Martin will be the first presenter. So I see he's turned his camera on. Thank you, Nick. I will hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Commissioner Kessler. I am Nick Martin, public member for Congressional District 4. And just because I have the mic for a very short time here, I'll add my thanks to Ben and Kristen for their service on EQB. Ben also served with me, or serves with me up until the current point, on the subcommittee for pilot program implementation for this pilot program that we're providing an update on now. So thanks for your help there as well, Ben. I don't have too much to say. I'm going to pretty quickly hand it over to Denise Wilson. But just a few comments. Just to refresh people's memory, early this year, we had good discussions both with ERIS and with the full EQB around sort of the overall framework and design for this pilot program, and in particular how staff are reaching out to get participation from all the different stakeholders in the environmental review process. And we had discussion of the metrics for efficiency and effectiveness in collecting climate information as part of the new revised EAW, and the approach to getting information on those metrics. All of that is summarized on the Climate Change and Environmental Review Pilot Program website, including a memo with those metrics if folks need a reminder. What's happened since then is there have been two so far, meetings in the speaker series. I got to attend one of those where Bar Engineering presented on sort of methods and tools for greenhouse gas footprint analysis. And I thought that was really useful. It I think helps a lot to give both project proposers and RGUs a sense of some of the tools that are out there to answer the new questions that are being asked on the EAW. There was a second such presentation on MnDOT's greenhouse gas calculator, and also very useful tools. I will just put in the chat a link because those presentations and even video recordings are available on the pilot program website. I don't know if I actually managed to send that effectively. So if I didn't, maybe EQB staff can send out a link to that, link in the chat to that website. And we have one more of those coming up on April 28th, where we'll go from an environmental advocate perspective as well. So I think that's all I have to say. I want to hand it over to Denise Wilson to give an update on the progress of the pilot program so far.
I think we had a little technical difficulty with the slide deck. It should be coming up here pretty quickly. Here we go. Thank you, Eric. So good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. For the audience, my name is Denise Wilson, and I am the director of the State Environmental Review Program. And this afternoon, I'm going to give you an update on the pilot program recruitment status, the speaker and cohort sessions, and the different ways we will be receiving feedback on the pilot program environmental assessment worksheet form. Next slide, please. So currently we have 93 individuals registered for the pilot program from 25 local units of government, including cities, counties, and watershed districts around the state. We have all 7 state government agencies that act as responsible governmental units. And we have 30 consulting firms. Next slide. So for the duration of the pilot program, EQB staff are hosting monthly speaker sessions on topics that support implementation of the pilot program EAW form, followed by cohort sessions limited to state and local government agencies and technical consultants, where they can ask more detailed technical questions and share experiences. The February session focused on greenhouse gas assessment. We had 102 people attend the speaker session and 53 people attend the cohort session. The March session focused on the Minnesota Department of Transportation greenhouse gas quantification tool for transportation projects. We had 50 people attend the speaker session and 26 people attend the cohort session. And coming up on April 28th, Amelia Voss, regulatory attorney from the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, will discuss how communities use and understand environmental review information. More details about this session can be found on the EQB in the EQB Monitor weekly publication and on the pilot program webpage. All of the speaker sessions are recorded and also available on the pilot program webpage. Next slide, please. Since January, there have been 38 notices for environmental assessment worksheets published in the EQB Monitor. 4 of those projects use the pilot program EAW form. Projects reviewed using the pilot program EAW form are identified with a star next to the project title, and past issues of the EQB Monitor can be found on the EQB webpage. Next slide, please. So if you are a member of the community or an organization who reviewed an environmental review document that includes climate information, you may complete a brief survey to help us understand your thoughts on the climate information included in the pilot program EAW form. This survey is designed to get feedback on the elements of the pilot program form, and anyone that reviewed the document but did not submit comments on the project may submit their feedback here. Any comments about a specific project should be submitted directly to the responsible governmental unit that prepared those environmental documents. Next slide, please. So in addition, at the completion of each project using the pilot program EAW form, EQB staff are sending out surveys to get feedback from RGUs, project proposers, and consultants. We are also asking the RGU that prepared that document to send a survey to anyone that submitted comments and provided an email address. And so there are 2 mechanisms that allow feedback from the members of the public who used and reviewed information in these forms. Again, the first one is just general feedback from someone who did not submit comments. And then we actually have a targeted survey for members of the public who submitted comments to better understand their experience with that information. Next slide, please. So there are multiple opportunities to stay informed about the pilot program. Information on the pilot program will be regularly updated on the EQB project webpage. You can join on that webpage, you can join the pilot program email distribution list and sign up to receive notifications via the EQB Monitor our weekly newsletter. So thank you very much. And at any point, if anyone has questions about the pilot program, feel free to send me an email or give me a call directly. So thank you.
Thank you, Denise and Nick. Are there any questions for these guys from board members? If so, please raise your hand or turn your camera off and unmute. I have a question while people are thinking, Denise. So you said that 4 applications since January out of, did you say 39 had opted in or had decided to use the form? And in the vein of getting feedback on this process and understanding how it's working, did the 35 that chose not to use the form communicate why they didn't use the form, or did we ask?
We have not asked, but that's actually a wonderful recommendation to, be able to reach out and encourage them to register to participate going forward.
Yeah, seems like somebody who's at least those entities will be recently knowledgeable of the environmental review platform in the state and might have some relevant feedback or insights.
Thank you.
Other questions from board members?
Yes, I have a question. This is Al Forsberg. And looking at the speaker participants, and I took part in the first two and found them very interesting and helpful. The third one is with the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. So we're going to get their perspective. I'm wondering if we've thought about asking for the perspective from the project proposers on how this fits into a project development process, so that we understand where this fits within that total project development process.
Madam Chair, Board Member Forsberg, I think that's an excellent idea. Sometimes we run into a little trouble getting volunteers. So if you know of any projects where you think someone might volunteer to come and present on their project, oftentimes it's challenging too, especially when they're starting out and before they go to public notice, because members of the public could get confused and think this is an open house or a meeting for that project rather than focused on the actual form. But I think once a project has concluded, and we have 4 examples now, we could invite one of those government agencies to come and reflect on their experience.
And another option might be to look at a group that represents project proposers, such as the Chamber of Commerce or the housing development process with these large residential developments. We're asking MCEA, they're basically representing a number of environmental groups and environmental interests. Is there a project proposer group that could do that?
I can definitely reach out and check, and we asked, MCEI did volunteer to come and talk and provide their perspective, not necessarily from that advocacy position, but as sort of an informational position where they share how they use the information and give feedback to folks who are preparing these documents, and more as a representative voice of sort of a consumer of the information.
Right, and I recall getting some good comments from the Chamber of Commerce and from the egg industry, the dairy industry. Perhaps one of those groups would be interested in sharing how they would use this within their process.
And Madam Chair, Board Member Forsberg, we can definitely reach out and make that request.
Yes, thank you.
Denise, it looks like Board Member Tollefson has her hand up.
Hi, Denise. This is Kristen. I think we've talked briefly before about the potential opportunity to bring in somebody from a association of planners, from the planners' perspective, the planners that work with the RGUs. And I'll just repeat that suggestion. So that's it.
Oh, thank you very much, Board Member Heidi Tollefson.
Anyone else? If not, we can move on to the next agenda item. I'll say thank you to Board Member Martin and Denise and people who asked questions and weighed in. It's more valuable for all of our time when we hear more voices. So the next agenda item is a presentation of the 2021 Environmental Review Program Performance Report. And I'm happy to turn it over to the other Katrina on the call. So the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Katrina Hafta. I'm the Environmental Review Program Coordinator for the board. Today, I have the privilege to present on the 2021 Minnesota Environmental Review Program Performance Report. Next slide. Before I discuss the report, I'm going to provide some background information. Minnesota's Environmental Review Program is a delegated program. This means EQB has oversight of program rules as authorized in Minnesota statute and rule and carries out administrative duties, but delegates the responsibility to apply the rules to individual projects to other governmental units known as responsible governmental units or RGUs. Under these laws, board members have the responsibility for monitoring environmental review program effectiveness and have the authority to make program improvements. EQB's role is focused on program consistency and assisting governmental units and interested people with understanding and implementing these rules. On behalf of the board, EQB staff track environmental review program data primarily through environmental review notices. Next slide. In 2019, we created a data management plan. The data management plan establishes data collection procedures and creates the framework for the performance report. Using the framework established in the data management plan, EQB staff annually produce their performance report to provide meaningful interpretation of the annual data to assess the effectiveness of the environmental review program and to identify recommendations to improve ER program effectiveness, to adjust the data management plan, to develop and revise environmental review program guidance, and to inform environmental review program improvement initiatives. As I mentioned, today I will be focusing on the 2021 performance report. Next slide. It is important to note that the data collected as part of the data management plan and assessed in the annual performance report is limited to what EQB staff can reasonably and consistently track on a year-over-year basis. Using a consistent, systematic approach for data collection and reporting ensures accurate consideration of potential anomalies that may occur from year to year. In addition to the data identified in the data management plan, EQB staff consider the need for environmental review program changes through feedback collected from discussions at board meetings and subcommittee meetings, advisory panels convened by the board, and public comments received on periodic rulemaking, just to name a few. Next slide, please. The 2021 Environmental Review Program Performance Report is organized into 3 sections: accountability, efficiency, and transparency, which are aligned with the Environmental Review Program objectives identified in Minnesota Rules Chapter 4410 and values expressed in the 2018 EQB Strategic Plan. The Environmental Review Program encourages accountability in both public and private decision-making, reduces delay and uncertainty, and eliminates duplication, provides the public with systematic access to decision makers, and provides usable information concerning the potential environmental effects of a proposed project. Next, we're going to review some of the highlights of the data and conclusions presented in the report, organized by section. Next slide, please. Under the accountability section, this chart shows the frequency of environmental review by process type over the last 7 years. As you can see on the chart, the 2021 data was similar in proportion to previous years. For example, environmental assessment worksheets, or EAWs, continue to comprise over 80% of all environmental review completed. There were no environmental impact statements completed in 2021. While there are no recommendations associated with this chart, it provides an overview of the environmental review program over time. Next slide, please. Next, we'll review the report conclusions for this section. The page numbers at the top of the slide and on the subsequent report conclusion slides correspond with the section where it can be found in your AERS packet. As I just mentioned, the frequency of environmental review in 2021 was consistent with annual variations from year to year, except in 2021, there were no EISs completed. This is inconsistent with the previous 6 years, and staff will continue to monitor to identify any possible trends. Also in 2021, we began collecting the number of comment letters received by responsible government units or environmental review projects. The number of comment letters received varied from project to project. The 2021 data demonstrates that the Environmental Review Program provides opportunities for direct access to government decision makers. However, more data is needed to understand the degree to which members of the public engage with the environmental documents. Next slide, please. Under the efficiency section, EQB staff track the points of contact for technical assistance. This chart displays the makeup of user groups who reached out to EQB for environmental review technical assistance. The volume of technical assistance provided by staff increased across all user groups from 599 points of contact in 2020 to over 1,000 points of contact in 2021. The volume of requests affirms that EQB staff are fulfilling the responsibility for assisting governmental units and interested people in understanding the rules. Next slide. So I mentioned, you can tell from that increase that in 2021, the frequency of technical assistance provided was high. Because of that high volume of technical assistance, EQB staff recommend updating guidance documents and environmental review web pages to ensure information is clearly written, effectively communicated, and easy to find for all interested people. Also, EQB had a low response rate to surveys designed to assess the effectiveness of the technical assistance provided. Thus, EQB staff need to improve how we measure that effectiveness. EQB staff also track the time and cost of completing review. In 2021, the average time between initial notice and final decision was consistent with data from previous years for all environmental review process types. Next, for tracking cost, more data is needed to assess the cost for implementing environmental review and identify trends in the future. Next slide, please. For the transparency section in 2021, EQB staff implemented recommendations from the 2019 performance report for metrics used to track and report the effectiveness of environmental review program transparency. Responsible governmental units submitting final decisions on environmental review documents to the EQB monitor were asked to answer a series of questions about the environmental review process. 79% indicated that the environmental review process provided usable information. 81% indicated that the environmental review process identified mitigation measures. 76% indicated the environmental review process provided public participation that would not have otherwise occurred for the proposed project. The data collected in 2021 sets the baseline for comparison to future years. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the environmental review data collected in 2021 for analysis in the annual performance report was similar to previous years. The data collected helps us understand the effectiveness of the environmental review program for the metrics of accountability, efficiency, and transparency, and identifies recommendations for environmental review program improvement. In 2021, the recommendations focused on technical assistance and environmental review program feedback. EQB staff spend a significant amount of time answering questions about the environmental review program. We would like to improve the program's efficiency by updating guidance documents and environmental review web pages so that interested people can more readily find the information that they are looking for. Another challenge we face is collecting feedback on the environmental review program from our various constituencies. We're going to be exploring different ways we could improve feedback collection as a staff this year for future years. After today's meeting, staff will begin to develop plans to implement the report's recommendations, and we'll report next year when we report the next year's performance report. Something I want you all to keep in mind as we move into the discussion section of this presentation is that given the challenges I mentioned earlier in the presentation, is there other data or information you might need to fulfill your responsibility to affirm the effectiveness of the environmental review program? Next slide. Thank you for your time this afternoon. If you have questions after today's meeting, my contact information is on the screen.
Thank you, Katrina, for the presentation. We'll now open it up for discussion from the board. Thoughts on the data? Looks like board member Connor Steenberg has his hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Katrina, for the presentation. It's really helpful to see that data. I guess one of the questions I have is I'm struck by the infrequency of environmental impact statements that you described. And I wonder if you have any hypotheses about why those seem to be so infrequent. I mean, I think the legal standard is the potential for significant environmental effects, not even the actuality of significant environmental effects, but the mere potential is enough to justify an EIS. And so we're saying almost, in 2021, nothing happened that had the potential for significant environmental effects. And that seems a doubtful proposition to me. So I guess I'm wondering what your theories might be.
First thing I'll point out is a little bit of nuance about our data is that when we are reporting on the number of environmental reviews, we're talking about the number that are completed. So there may have been environmental impact statements in process in 2021, but we look at the numbers completed so that we can so that we're not duplicating and counting things twice. And then in terms of hypotheses for this question, I think I'm going to turn over to the director of our environmental review program, Denise Wilson. I know she has some excellent insight into this.
Thank you, Katrina, and thank you, member Connor Steenberg. So we get this question often, and it is sometimes used as sort of an example of a failure of the program. And from those who believe that more environmental impact statements should be ordered as a result of an environmental assessment worksheet. And in practice, typically what happens with the responsible governmental units is that a project proposer will provide what they call a data submittal that defines their project, that does a preliminary assessment, and that RGU, or responsible governmental unit, will let them know ahead of time that, the way that this process, the way that they've done their analysis and also the information provided by the project proposer would indicate the need for an EIS. And the majority of the time, they will change their projects rather than go out to public comment with the anticipation that an EIS would be needed. And so during that public comment period, it invites other government agencies and experts and members of the public to provide any additional information that could inform, those potential environmental effects. And if none of that information indicates that the project has the potential for significant environmental effect, they are basing the decision on that readily available information. And so while it doesn't seem very satisfying that we don't have more EISs, I think it's also indicative of the good work of the responsible governmental units to be thoughtful and mindful, and also project proposers in taking the initiative to reduce their environmental effects before they go forward.
Madam Chair, if I might, just in response, I would love to talk, maybe I can talk more directly with Denise at some point about this question, because I mean, there's a real difference between, obviously, you know this much better than I do, between what happens in an EAW and an EIS. I mean, there's no, as I recall, one doesn't have to address mitigations, for example, in an EAW. So to the extent that that either as a result of process or law or a combination, the EAW is becoming a substitute for the EIS, it's not a complete substitute in my view. And so I would love to talk to you more about this offline. I won't monopolize the conversation here today, but thank you for the response. I appreciate it.
So, Madam Chair and Member Connor Steenberg, this was actually one of the issues that the Environmental Review Advisory Panel grappled with, because they said a lot of the EAWs are turning into mini EISs, that they're so robust, but they do, by doing that, they avoid having to look at alternatives as well as social and economic impacts. And so it's something we're aware of, and I think that we have ideas on maybe going forward for evaluating how we might address that concern.
Thank you.
All right. And now it looks like board member Heidi Tollefson. That's her name. Go ahead.
Thank you. I had two questions. One, I wondered, Katrina, if I was struck by the number of public calls and public text, 33% public assistance. I wonder if you have ever done follow-up surveys to those calls, like when you call your bank and they say, how was this, support? It would seem to be a pretty direct and easy way to get some basic information into the pipeline. Have you tried that?
So our mechanism that we used to assess effectiveness last year was a follow-up survey, was to collect their email over the phone if it was a phone conversation, or to send them a follow-up email. But that is a mechanism that perhaps we could try out and see if that improves our response rates and helps us better measure effectiveness of technical assistance.
Well, good. I mean, I have to assume that it's pretty effective for how many organizations use it. So that would be great. I'd love to see that. And then I had a question about, do we have any data on agency review and comment on EAWs I'm a local government planning commissioner, and the agency review of EAWs and comments are extremely important to us at the local level.
And can you clarify? So this year we started collecting the number of comment letters that RGUs receive on environmental review documents. But this was the first year we were collecting that. So what we have right now is baseline data for that metric. Is there something more specific that you were thinking?
Katrina, I can jump in a little bit because I think I know what board member or subcommittee member Heidi Tollefson. I think we've had that discussion before, and right now EQB does not have, per the rules, any type of compliance or enforcement mechanism for understanding the quality of the information that's included in an EAW form. And so we don't necessarily have access when a project is being evaluated and the type of feedback that an RGU might get. And so it would be challenging for us to compile that information in any type of consistent and reliable way.
So you don't think it would be possible to compile that from the agency end, the EAWs that they comment on or the EAWs that they review?
I imagine that we could get that information if we asked each state agency to copy us every time they sent, a comment letter on, on a specific project. But I'm just not sure how we might use that information or what it would inform.
It is a practice to send the EAWs to the agencies, right?
That's correct.
Right. And there's no requirement that they review or respond to those EAWs. Is that correct? Or what's the expectation there?
That's correct. We ask for copies of those environmental review documents in order to, have a copy ourselves. And also, should we get a request for a copy, we generally either send them to the responsible governmental unit, or there have been times where we've also provided the document to ensure that it's received in a timely manner. But we do not currently review those documents. We don't necessarily, frankly, have the technical expertise to sort of evaluate another governmental unit's evaluation of the potential environmental effects of that project.
Oh, of course. I understand that. I'm just talking about the data point. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or discussion? I guess one question I have, and I don't know that we have an answer for this yet, is thinking about the different data that we track or we could track going forward following the completion of the pilot project, how we might track climate related opportunities as part of environmental review. I can imagine that there will be interest in that. That's mitigation opportunities, quantification of greenhouse gases avoided or considered, or both.
Depending on,
Something to put out there for the group, given that we are all invested in this pilot project and interested in having data drive our decisions and dialogues.
I can imagine that there would be interest in that, and that might be data that would shape the data management plan in future years after the pilot program concludes.
Chair Kessler, I just wanted to chime in too and say, you know, board members, you're asking really good questions about the data, and a lot of them are new questions. And, you know, that speaks to kind of one of the perennial challenges that we have at EQB. We could spend the entirety of our staff time collecting and analyzing data on environmental review, but of course that's not our charge, right? And so what we try to do is be strategic in terms of what data points can we collect with relative ease that are going to inform our program and give us a sense of change over time. The data is, even to our mind as staff who work with the program every day, not the perfect data set that we would want to inform the program. And that's why, you know, as Katrina mentioned in her presentation, we also look at feedback from other places, you know, not just these data points. But it is a perennial problem, and we welcome continued problem solving around it and how we could maximize, you know, those data, or if there's a different data point that we could collect with relative ease that would be more informative, and we could let go of another data point and kind of scale it. We're, you know, open to creative thinking on this. And so that's part of the goal of this presentation, is to get you thinking about this. And I know some of you are hearing this maybe for the first time or maybe just the second time. And it's also relatively new in the arc of EQB history that we've been doing these annual performance reports. So we're learning as we go, learning about what type of mechanisms do get a response rate from people, what type don't. So we're welcome to additional conversation beyond this meeting today.
Board member Heidi Tollefson, do you have another question? No.
Sorry, I didn't take my
No
hand
problem.
up.
I am super challenged to put my hand up, so I kind of am glad that I get to be the chair, so that I don't have to do that. I am not.
I will say, I will repeat something I mentioned in the briefing, the citizen member briefing, which is how remarkably important this new data program management is, particularly when we face challenges at the legislature and legislators understanding it's really, in my long years of observation, it's really a major breakthrough, and I appreciate it.
I agree. I think it helps us make our case, and it helps us be more strategic in the way that we position resources going forward. So 100% agree. Okay, looks like board member Forsberg has a question. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm thinking too that this is a very good effort on EQB's part, a very important effort. I'm wondering, it would appear that it gives the process a pretty positive report card, that the system is working well, if that's the correct conclusion. And then also, nothing's perfect. What improvements should we be making, considering?
Yep, and I think that's the question where we're looking for insight really from the subcommittee for ideas on what additional, given the challenges that we have, what additional data or information would be helpful so that you are really affirming the board's responsibility or fulfilling the board's responsibility to affirm the environmental review program's effectiveness. So we're open to your ideas.
Well, to me, the basic question is cost effectiveness. These documents cost money and they take time. Did they make a difference? Did project proposers revise their projects as they went through the process? I don't know if there's a way to get at that.
Oh, Madam Chair, Board Member Forsberg, I think we tried to get at that information in a new way in this report, in that, previously we would send out surveys, and now we actually have a question for RGUs before they can submit their request for public, or to notice their record of decision. So after the project has concluded, we ask them now whether or not they felt this project made a difference, whether it was provided, additional information that wouldn't have otherwise been available, whether the review included mitigation, and also opportunities for the public to participate in the decision-making process that other types of processes did not include. And you can see overall, I think it was very positive, and around 80% response that our program did provide these mechanisms.
Is there any measure for whether the project actually was revised? If it came in of, say, X size, after going through the review process, it went at a different size, for instance?
So, Madam Chair and Board Member Forsberg, no, that's a challenge that we can ask for that information, but we don't have any way to require it, and we don't have any way to sort of to validate it. And so we could provide reflections, and that's the same as cost too. We can ask questions about cost, but we don't have sort of a process by which to validate that information, or required on such a level that it would provide, statistically valid information.
I can chime in. Yeah, I can chime in too and just say, you're raising good questions, Board Member Forsberg. Again, this is part of the perennial problem with both kind of time and cost. There are a number of challenges that we've faced in trying to collect that data in a reliable way. And because it is relying on oftentimes kind of subjective input from other people, we have no objective way, given that it's a delegated program, of kind of verifying that information. And so we found over the years of trying to collect this information that
Executive Director Pratt, it's really hard to hear you. Are others having a hard time hearing Katie? I know you're saying things, but your words are not really audible.
Okay. I will just be
I'm sure what you're saying is super smart and like right on and an answer, but I still cannot hear you very well.
Well, I can chime in just because I sort of know what Executive Director Pratt is alluding to, and that again, it goes back to our role and the challenges we faced with sort of describing our role in collecting information that's available to us in a reliable and consistent way. And versus, it is a delegated program. So those other governmental units, have the authority and the discretion to implement the program and apply those rules to those specific projects without our oversight or without our intervention and assessment. And so when we ask for information, if we provide it, we need to make sure that it's, the approach that we take is consistent, systematic, and accurate. And we're challenged with how we could do that in relation to time and cost. And again, we've talked about this a little bit in the subcommittee for the pilot program, in understanding the value also. So you have the time and the cost for the value of the information, and that value can change based on sort of the user or consumer of that information.
I'll
Okay,
just chime in as someone who represents a entity who is delegated and does environmental review. I think the question is a very good one. Iterative work happens once somebody submits an application based on feedback from the RGU to minimize impacts. Applications are revised, Whether or not they get entirely resubmitted or if data are just refined and provided through a back and forth with the RGU. Oftentimes, projects are much more viable and permittable by the time the true earnest work on environmental review starts. And it is possible that conversations have been going on for months prior to that point. So as Denise noted, it's probably a little bit different in every place, but I can tell you that in the experience of the MPCA, the question about environmental impact statements is a good one too. A lot of times projects are scaled down and refined such that by the time they actually submit an application, they're much smaller in scope and do represent less potential significant impacts because of conversations that happened in advance. It's hard to track those data. Doesn't make your question any less valid or important. It's just the way that this works often.
No, and actually the environmental review process is not the EQB process alone. If you're developing a project, you're going to be working with Bowser and the MPCA and the DNR and the Corps of Engineers to revise your project so that you can get those permits. So the process includes a lot more than just that environmental document. By bringing it from the abstract to the more specific, say you're designing a highway project, for instance, and your initial project requires to fill 5 acres of wetland. You go through the process, the project is revised so that it only requires 2 acres of wetland fill. That's the difference. That's the change that came about because of this entire environmental review process. And I'm asking, is it some way to measure those changes with these projects? Perhaps not. Perhaps it's too complicated.
All right, other questions or comments? It's always nice to see robust discussion about data.
Yes.
All right, well, if not, thank you, Katrina. The next agenda item is a presentation by Yasmin Robinson, who's the program administrator of EQB on the Environmental Review Continuous Improvement Plan. So what we might work on together going forward based on opportunities. So excited to have Yasmin go next.
Thank you. I think this is a great segue from this conversation. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yasmin Robinson. I am the Environmental Review Program Administrator here at EQB. And today I will be presenting about the idea of continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So today we will quickly discuss board authorities, previous program evaluation initiatives, our ideas for a proposed continuous improvement process, next steps, and then we will open up the floor for some more discussion. Next slide. So as you know, the Environmental Quality Board has a general responsibility to monitor and take appropriate measures to modify and improve the effectiveness of the environmental review rules. Next slide. Since 1991, there have been approximately 12 studies, reports, and/or evaluations conducted by state agencies and outside parties. Over time, many program improvement needs have been identified, and incremental changes and evaluations related to specific projects have occurred, but they have not resulted in sustained and systemic program updates. So today we will discuss the last 3 that you see on this timeline. Next slide. In 2007, EQB requested a study to review the board's role as it pertains to the environmental review program and report back with recommendations. EQB staff and tech reps held meetings and convened a subgroup to study issues in more detail. They reviewed environmental review reform ideas that resulted from reports conducted between 1990 and 2002. They also grouped and sorted those ideas. They examined the history of environmental review reform efforts and in order to understand the lessons learned from those efforts. And an interesting quote related to lessons learned from this report says, "Experience has shown that each side tends to see room for improvement, yet fears that change may lead to reversals of progress from their own points of view. Consensus or win-win solutions have proven to be elusive." Next slide. Because of 2010 legislative concerns about the length of time for environmental reviews and permitting, the legislative auditor was directed to evaluate the environmental review program. This evaluation was focused on private sector projects and asked 3 questions. One was, what are the key elements in the environmental review and permitting process? How timely are the processes for undergoing environmental reviews and obtaining permits? And how well does the environmental review process meet its objectives? And this quote says, "Despite several attempts over time, the Environmental Quality Board and others have had limited success reforming the environmental review process, although the process needs ongoing evaluation and improvement." Next slide. And finally, in 2017, EQB created an advisory panel to the environmental review program to identify areas of concern and propose changes to modify the program. And this panel had 3 objectives: to provide suggestions for modernizing and improving the effectiveness and efficiency of the environmental review program, to review issue-focused suggestions from the public, to guide EQB in larger policy questions, and to participate in a forum with members of the public and with people with disparate worldviews, with the hopes of arriving at solutions that benefit everyone in Minnesota. And this quote says, "EQB staff have initiated several opportunities for public engagement. At times, these initiatives resulted in conflicting and competing process improvement recommendations." Next slide. So these past evaluation efforts have many similar characteristics. They all have identified many program improvement needs. They've spurred incremental changes and evaluations related to specific projects. They were mostly reactive efforts occurring infrequently and on an inconsistent timeline. And they did not result in substantial or sustained program improvements to meet the changing needs. And I think our conclusion here is that we need proactive, ongoing, and consistent approaches to program improvement. Next slide, please. So based on that conclusion, we are proposing to create an environmental review continuous improvement team. And continuous improvement is a process through which consistent change can be made. And for every organization, this will look different, but the basic elements are the same: planning and assessing what you need to do, implementing those actions, and looking back to see if that process worked. We think a continuous improvement team could develop a recurring program improvement process that will identify and prioritize program changes in a strategic and transparent and also efficient manner. And we also think that this effort would build on past evaluation efforts that have happened, but will focus more specifically on near-term program changes that the board can act on. Next slide. So we envision that possible elements of this would include a standing interagency team to advise and implement, regular deliberation by ARIS and members of the board, as well as public engagement mechanisms. Next slide. Other elements could include a comprehensive list of needed program changes based on past and current program evaluation efforts, and input from state and local RGUs, tribal nations, project proposers, and the public. A method for deliberating on and prioritizing program changes, creating a regular method of updating this approach. And I think a really important part of this is a clear indication of action steps, the timeline, and the resources needed for those action steps. Next slide, please. The benefits of a continuous improvement process would allow EQB to respond more effectively to emerging environmental issues, to better incorporate technical advances in tools, resources, and scientific knowledge, and to provide increased transparency. Next slide. So the next steps here will include, assembling the continuous improvement team, working on a draft project charter, scope, and project schedule, compiling and assessing relevant improvement ideas based on the body of work that you've seen a glimpse of here today. We'll develop a process for prioritization and then give regular updates and discussion items to the board. Next slide. So thank you very much. As this is a new approach, we wanted to discuss this with the board today. So I think at this point, we will open it up for discussion.
Thank you, Yasmin, for the presentation. Are there questions from board members?
I know this is a new approach, but based on some of your experiences with various continuous improvement initiatives in your organizations, I think our first hope was to get some feedback on this approach from you today.
Well, I will start as people raise their hands and say that from the perspective of the Pollution Control Agency, we have learning and continuous improvement and innovation as one of our values. And so we try to utilize formal and informal continuous improvement tools to drive cultural change and growth within the agency, and have found, particularly in our public sector settings where we have expectations of ourselves, and public and private entities externally have expectations of us, that the transparency that comes with going through a formal continuous improvement process, whether it's developing a work plan or analyzing a problem and looking at solutions such that people can understand and see themselves both in the problem and in the solution, or the challenge and the opportunity, has been very helpful for our agency. And I will also say that change within government sometimes takes longer than I think we would all like. And putting a formal structure, such as a continuous improvement framework, around a challenge, and then holding yourself accountable through steps and a timeline, can help move things along. So I think it's exciting and something that I look forward to participating in. And now, since I've talked enough, I see that board member Ivy Tollefson has her hand up. So go ahead.
I have a little bit of history in this and was involved in most of those initiatives as a citizen representative. And but the thing that I want to mention, I'm very excited about this, because there was a mechanism that we used in the old EQB before EQB before the Power Plant Siting Act was turned over to the PUC and to the Department of Commerce. And that was that there was an annual hearing. Do you know about this? There was an annual hearing that the staff held at EQB, that to which anybody who had participated in environmental review that year or recently was invited, notified if that was possible. It was also something that was every year, and so people knew about it. And that hearing was held specifically for people to share their experience with the staff of the environmental review process. It was primarily citizens, but I would love to see what it might look like if it was, all of the parties. But it was an extremely valuable opportunity. And we actually used to have cake too. But the the thing that didn't work and hasn't worked at PUC either is that there was not the kind of structure for the continuous improvement that you're talking about. And so it was, while information was gathered, there was not a mechanism to integrate that into a continuous improvement process. So I really applaud this project, and hope that you might consider something like an annual hearing or an annual meeting as an input point. Be interesting to see what that might look like if there was actually a process that would support its implementation.
Absolutely. And I would also love to hear your thoughts, as somebody who has participated in some of those past initiatives. I'm sure, you have a lot of institutional knowledge that would be very helpful for moving this effort forward.
Well, thank you. I love to talk about it. And I did also want to mention that I hope that perhaps the standing interagency team, since 72% of the projects are done by RGUs and 16% by agencies, I would hope that there might be some way of integrating other experienced stakeholders into the interagency team process, so that it is a little more transparent and inclusive. So that's my other, and I've thought a lot about that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It looks like, well, let's call on board member Dawn Berger, because we have not yet heard from her today.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Yasmin. Thank you for talking through this topic with us. And I would also underscore what Madam Chair mentioned about the PCA, that MnDOT2 is very open to and embraces continuous improvement. And with the idea of moving toward this sort of thing, just a couple thoughts wanted to get out there. I think it would be good to take some time upfront to define more precisely the roles and expectations of then the EQB members in this, and then the other agency staff roles. And I think one of the important key items here is the collaboration coordination across agencies as we're looking at this. And one thing I think that would really help with that too is to bring in a third-party consultant to help with that coordination, but also some of the legwork that would need to be done for the deliverables, such as the compilation of a comprehensive list of needed program changes based on the past and current program evaluation efforts, and assisting with the developing methods for prioritizing program changes, and assisting with developing regular process for updating the continuous improvement approaches, and how we address these emerging concerns and the new information that comes out, and then the assisting with the compiling of action steps, timelines, setting timelines, of course, defining resources needed for those action steps, and how we go about getting those. So just some thoughts on that from the MnDOT perspective. Thanks.
Those are all wonderful suggestions, and I think things that we've all been thinking about at the staff level is how do we scope and scale this appropriately so that we are able to get the meaningful outcomes that we all want, while still releasing the small but mighty power of the EQB staff.
Agreed. And Board Member Forsberg.
Yes, it just strikes me that we have elements of continuous improvement already that we incorporate into this. We've got a strategic plan. We have performance review data that was just reviewed by us earlier. And then we get public comments. And I recall, I don't remember who it was, who said, always leave a project better than when you started. So every year we should be able to look back and say it's better now than when we started. But I guess what I'm thinking is,
absolutely agree.
yeah, rather than have a completely new process here, how do we incorporate what we already have with a strategic plan, performance review, public comments?
I think those are some of the, the building blocks of what we are hoping to build off of. And, all of those elements are really important ways that the program functions today. And we certainly don't want to dismiss any of those or any of the results that come from those, and definitely want to build and move forward. And I absolutely agree with you that it would be wonderful to look back every year and say, that we've been able to make meaningful improvements.
Executive Director Pratt, or Board Member Forsberg, did you have a follow-up question?
Mute. So
Now we're going to go to Executive Director Pratt, who I still cannot hear. So perhaps it's just me. Anyone else?
how about now?
I have found in the settings, if you go to the audio settings, there is an opportunity to increase your input and output level. Sometimes voices are softer, and I have to actually increase that. So, just a tip in case others are having that challenge. So maybe as people think, can we talk about the next steps and the timing for this?
I think today we were hoping, just to hear feedback, first of all, are we pointed in the right direction? Because we certainly wouldn't want to move forward, using staff time if we were not using, the right approach. But from the conversation so far, it sounds like we are pointed in the proper direction. I think, depending on, again, the scope and scale of this, we could get this mobilized quite quickly, and then start working on the project charter, which will hopefully outline a little bit more of what the staff roles and responsibilities are from the other agencies. Start thinking about the timeline, because I think there's a lot of ways that this can go and a lot of room for creativity in making a process that really works specifically for us. But I think everyone would love to have this done quickly, and I think Denise has some thoughts on that as well.
Go ahead, Denise.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think also that, again, as Yasmin said, it's a scope and scale of how we move forward. And, how fast we go depends on the resources we have available. And so our hope is that we would be able to tap into EQB member agency resources to help do some of this work too, but with the goal of, sort of mirroring past the way we've implemented past projects, to then take that framework out to a more public forum and to get feedback before we would come to the board, so that you would have a robust set of information on how to, think about prioritizing these initiatives and what initiatives might move forward. And so I think one of the things we would like to hear from folks today is whether or not that's a concern for you. I know you're all busy within your agencies and have, a full roster of work to do. But again, if we have the opportunity, we would appreciate some of those resources to be devoted or allocated to at least framing out this initiative. We know that our RGU agencies specifically have expertise that really helps us sort of frame out the work that we do.
Yeah, really good point, Denise, and it's good to put an ask out there and to get input. I will say that we do have an operational improvement unit within the MPCA that houses our trained continuous improvement facilitators and staff, and they are an excellent resource to us, and they are always managing a very long queue of projects. As I noted, we are avid embracers of continuous improvement. That's not to say that we couldn't talk to you about that, and I would like to hear from other agencies too. I will say that I think it's very important as you develop any scope for continuous improvement, and you highlighted this, Denise, that you ask external partners, stakeholders, and others with a vested interest in this for their ideas and input, because you are only going to get a stronger product when you have more voices weighing in from the beginning. So appreciate that you put that out there, and I will put a strong plug for talking to the tribal nations at the government to government level as part of this process. And I see Director Pratt is back with her camera on. Can you use your microphone?
Any luck with my audio? Yay! Thank you. So just to add on to this conversation, and I think people are picking up really well on what we're trying to do here, but I just wanted to emphasize that we have on the table already identified many, many important improvements that could be made to environmental review. And these have not only in the past reports that Yasmin mentioned, but also in, for example, the mandatory category report that we brought forward at the end of last year. And part of the challenge with environmental review is because it covers so many different project types, as well as, of course, geographic areas in the state, it is difficult at the staff level, if we have to spend time working on some part of environmental review over here, that means that that's time that can't be spent on another need that has already been identified. And, to your point, Commissioner Kessler, we have had some really great recent conversations with tribal environmental staff, helping to pinpoint more precisely in what ways is the program working and not working for tribal nations. And we're at the beginning of that process. There's a lot more work to go there, but we have some hard decisions ahead of us as a board to think about where are we going to put our energy in terms of making changes. So I just wanted to emphasize that this isn't starting from scratch. This isn't endless months of kind of fact finding. We have a lot of facts on the table. Let's put our thinking caps on and figure out now how do we prioritize and move very quickly into those things that we can take action on, and knowing that there'll be some things hopefully in the easy bucket, and then there'll be things in the medium and hard bucket, and how do we utilize our resources most strategically to have it impact on the program, and again, that impact that meets multiple needs in the state.
Yeah, agreed. Great insight, Director Pratt. Any more comments from board members? Questions? Otherwise, I think what I heard Denise say is they will be reaching out to different agencies who may have capacity within their continuous improvement resources to share. So we will look for that, and opportunities for board members to engage in this going forward. Okay. Excellent. Next on the agenda is the public comment. So at this point, the ARIS committee welcomes public comment on the agenda items 4 through 7, so the bulk of what we've discussed today. I would just ask that people wishing to comment be mindful of the guidance and procedures on the board packet on the committee packet, page 1. I think someone was going to pull that up. So please raise your hand in WebEx if you would like to comment. And I believe that Rebecca will call on you and Faith will let you know if we've reached a time limit. So I will ask Rebecca at this point. Oh, here's the instructions again on how to raise your hand. Making sure that we all know how to do that. Put your hand up and put your hand down. Are there members of the public that would like to raise their hand and provide comment at this point?
Madam Chair, this is Rebecca. We don't have any raised hands yet.
All right, well, we can give it a second.
We do have one, Amelia Voss.
Excellent.
That you're ready. Sorry, just I'm gonna unmute you, Amelia. You should be able to talk now.
Welcome to the meeting, Amelia. Can you hear us?
I can now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just had a glitch at the exact moment that I was asked to speak, which is, of course, always how it goes. Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the ERIS committee. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and the great presentations that have been given by EQBU staff today, and appreciate all the hard work that is going into collecting data about the environmental review program and also looking forward and thinking about how we keep improving. I actually just had a question about the report looking at the environmental review kind of implementation and success in 21. And I was wondering if there was a similar data point. There was a bar graph shown that showed kind of feedback from the RGUs about how they understood the environmental review documents to be used and whether mitigations were included, things like that. I'm wondering if a similar data point was collected from the public.
To answer your question simply, Madam Chair, there was not a similar data point collected from the public about those questions were directed specifically to RGUs submitting final decisions on environmental review documents.
And I could, yeah, go ahead, Denise.
I'll say in the past, we have tried to gather that information through surveys, and we've reached out through telephone calls and interviews, and we've had such a low response rate that it was difficult to report out. And so, any ideas that you might have to help us generate that kind of data would be much appreciated.
And to add to what Denise is saying, the reason we were able to gather it effectively for RGUs is we basically made it a required question when they submit information to us via the monitor. So that's, basic participation is make it required. So we haven't found a mechanism that has been effective in getting that from the public, but welcome ideas.
I see that Amelia still has her hand up. We don't have any other hands up yet.
Amelia, do you have another question?
Well, I was just an idea on the last point. I'm wondering, since I know many comments are submitted to the RGUs via email, if there would be an opportunity to just circulate a survey to all the email addresses that submitted comments. That just might be one way to get public input, because I think that would be a really interesting comparison to look at kind of some of the same questions asked of the RGUs and how the public would answer those questions, and see, seeing if there's a disparity there about how the public perceives the documents versus the RGUs. And then I just wanted to say thank you for the idea of the continuous improvement plan. I think, as an environmental advocate, one thing that we and the project proposers agree on is that nobody's completely happy with how environmental review works. So I just appreciate the thought and the interest in trying to bridge some of those gaps, and brainstorm ideas around that. And then one last thing I'll say is I've thrown this idea out to Director Pratt before, and I'll say it again. She'll get sick of me saying this, but I do think one interesting data point, and I understand it wouldn't be something that you could collect annually, but I do think it would be helpful and meaningful to the public to look at, a sampling of projects that go through the EAW process, and to kind of follow up with them a year later or 2 years later and look at, we hypothesized that you wouldn't have any potential significant environmental effects. Did that come true? Was that accurate, or are we missing something in the environmental review documents that that we should be catching? And like I said, I know that that's a big thing to bite off, but I do think it would be a worthwhile investigation, even if we could only do it once, or on a random small sampling. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. It's always good to get input on ways that we could follow up and learn. Are there any other hands raised? Yeah, go ahead, Rebecca.
We don't have any more hands raised.
All right. Give it a silent count of 10 here and see if people decide they want to say something. Weigh in. If not, I will say thank you to the really informative presentations from the EQB staff, board members today. I think the material presented is a testament to the fact that we didn't have that. I mean, we had good discussion, but there weren't a lot of questions because it was very thorough and helpful. So always appreciate the content. And we have reached the end of the agenda. So at this point, I will ask board members if there is a meeting to adjourn, or a motion to adjourn. There is a meeting to adjourn, and I'm asking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Commissioner.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it, Al Forsberg.
Great, so Commissioner Arnold moved it, and Commissioner Board Member Forsberg seconded it. So all those in favor, please unmute yourself and say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, hearing no opposition, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Thank you, board members and EQB staff, and we will see you in person next month. Take care, all.